Good evening. Have you ever heard the question, you want to hear the good news or the bad news first? I don't know what I always want to hear, like I change it up. But many people choose the bad news first, so that way maybe the good news they hear last can overcome any bad news. But that doesn't work if the bad news is really bad news. However, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news? Here's the bad news. Moses died. The good news, there's somebody ready after Moses, and his name is Joshua. Judges chapter 2, verse 6 to 10, it says, when Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each of to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. Man. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountains of Gash. And all the generations also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work he had done for Israel. You see, there was a great transition from Moses to Joshua, but there was not such a great transition from Joshua to the next generation. We read that when Moses dies, Joshua, as everybody's kind of looking down, Joshua takes a cloak, splashes the waters open up, and the people are amazed. Oh, wow. The same God that was with Moses now is with Joshua. And that's why we got what we read, where God's people followed him at the 110 years old that he got to live. You see, it's beautiful when we have an easy transition from Moses to Joshua, but what happens? What begins to mess up along the way that we don't have another transition from Joshua to the next generation? In 2004 and 2008, the USA women's 4x1 meter Olympic relay team was absolutely the fastest. Like, not only would they win in their individual races, but they had some of the 4 out of the top 6 fastest women times. Like, there's no way you put these 4 fast women together to run one race. There's no way nobody else around the world could ever compete against them. They absolutely had, some people think, the fastest women's team ever. It's amazing to have the 4 fastest runners, but until someone crosses the finish line, none of those 4 fast runners win the race. You see, they should have won, but something happened in the exchange zone. There's an exchange zone as they're handing on the baton. It's 20 meters that they have to kind of run in that zone. And as one enters, the other begins to run, and they exchange. They practice this for days, weeks, months. And something happened in the exchange zone in the Olympics in 2004 in Athens. You see, this is what many people believe was the issue. Marion Jones, who was tired from a bunch of other events. If you look her up, you see that she's won countless gold medals. She was tired from other events. And what she had practiced with her in the exchange zone with her partner now was going to be a little bit different. Why? Because Marion Jones was tired at this point. She was exhausted. And it was the last exchange zone. And for whatever reason, the timing was off. You see, she was in first place, way ahead of everybody else until that moment. The last girl grabbed, because her timing was off, she got there a little too late, and the exchange was slightly after the exchange zone. And the whole team, the 4 fastest runners in the whole world, were disqualified. In Beijing 2008, again, they had the fastest team assembled. This time in the exchange zone, they dropped the baton. And again, the U.S. women's team was disqualified. The whole team lost for number one, because they passed the baton too late, and number two, they dropped the baton. You see, the way your children will fail in their chase for God as their fathers, parents, it has to do with this exchange zone. The way the older generation and the younger generation will fail in church life and leadership is in this exchange zone. The way not only parents, children, church leaders, and church members, but just in the community, the way we will fail as a culture is in this exchange zone. You see, either by giving it too late, by saying, no, they're too young, Generation Z, X, like I've heard all of them, right? They're lost cause. All they do is on social media. They're snowflakes, right? Even I've said that a couple of times. And they're this and that, and we disqualify the younger generation instead of properly, within the proper exchange zone, handing off responsibilities, handing off what is necessary so that the next generation can run this adequately. Either that's the issue, or just like in 2008 in Beijing, either we drop the ball, we drop it in the exchange zone. We just dismiss the future generation. We dismiss other leaders, or sometimes we're like, our children are just not understanding. They're growing up in different times, and we just drop the ball. Sadly, we forget that we are running together in this race. And it doesn't matter how great you are, how awesome I am, but unless we finish together, we all are disqualified. Doesn't matter how gifted or talented we are, but if we don't learn to run together and run with purpose, we will not finish. Now, to the church, to the believer, this is very important. Paul tells us, what use is it, right? To beat myself and into submission and be that good soldier, fighter, runner, yet be disqualified at the very end. That I can go save the whole wide world by myself, in the end, lose my own salvation. You see, it doesn't matter how big the church is. It doesn't matter how big your ministry is. It doesn't matter how big your calling or purpose is. It doesn't matter how big your family is. It doesn't matter how big your business is. But if we do not hand off the baton of faith in the proper hands to this next generation, we will not finish the race that God has called us to run. God's promises do not expire. And along with that, amen, God's promises, they go from one generation to the next. Just like generational curses, and we talked about it last week, God's promises, God's blessings, they don't expire. If he's promised something to me, maybe my eyes will see it and maybe my eyes won't see it. But if he promised that me and my house will serve the Lord, maybe I'll die one day and my kids won't serve Jesus. But the promise is that before they die, they'll serve the Lord. God's promises never expire. We are all part of a divine relay race, not in individual sprints. God didn't design the Christian life to be a bunch of individual sprinters. No, this is a relay race from one generation to another, from one family member to another, from one leader to another, from one pastor to his disciple, then to his disciple. It's a relay race that we are called to run. You see, before Joshua was Moses, and that exchange zone went perfect. We read it in Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 9 to 12, and it says, "And Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord commanded Moses. And there has not risen a prophet since in Israel like Moses. When the Lord knew face to face, none like him for all the signs and wonders that the Lord has sent him to do in the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all the land, and for all the mighty power and all the great deeds of terror that Moses did in the sight of all of Israel." The same respect they gave to Moses, now it was for Joseph. But now, 2 generations later, Judges 2, chapter 10, we read, and all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. Like even in my family, there's struggles sometimes where I'm like, Dad, I don't get those rules. My dad's a pastor, in case you don't know. And I don't understand why we do that. And it's not that he's scared to make changes. If you know my dad, as long as the message doesn't change, he's good with changing methods, right? But there's some methods where he's like, no, we're not going to change that. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you're sinning or not, but we're just going to stick to that. And like, it's taken me years to understand it, because many times I'm like in the middle now. The younger generation will take a change and just go with it. Like, they'll take a testimony, they'll take a mention and a message, like, man, what about the other 45 minutes I just preached about? Like, that's all you're going to remember, and go tell your parents that you're going to do this because Pastor Aaron said it? They'll take one mention and they'll just run with it. And they'll just, go to the extreme. And I see that. I've done it. I've wondered why. I've been challenged or wanted to do things, and my dad's had to say, like, hey, no, son. No, you'll see, you'll understand. And I get it now. And there's some things that we have changed, and there's some things that will change that I changed. Maybe my kids or the future leaders of this church will one day change. But my hope is that what we are relaying to the next generation, what we're relaying to the kids, to this future generation, to those that we disciple, that they know God, that they've seen God not only work and do miracles in our lives, but now they desire and want miracles in the same God to do something in their lives. Just like everybody saw Moses and what God did through Moses, there was one, Joshua. Joshua is so important, a leader among the people. If you're a youth pastor, you can have an amazing leadership committee team, but unless you find a Joshua, a leader within the high school group, within the junior high group, where you go and where you end, ministry is going to end. And it has to be a continual process. And unless they want to see God's glory face to face, just like they saw you encounter God's glory face to face, Moses, Joshua would not want that. And for whatever reason, Joshua dropped the baton, and he didn't find anybody else that wanted to encounter God the way Moses and Joshua had encountered God. You see, here's the thing. You say we have, our pastors, the pastor's sons, and now Aaron has 3 boys. Like, one of them will be a preacher, right? But no, it's not about just a pastoral family. It's about your family. It's about generations that follow us. Because even if Moses handed off the baton to Joshua, think about this. All of Moses' generation died in the desert. There was not one. I mean, it could have been one of the spies with Joshua that said, no, we can defeat these armies. No, God promised us. God is with us. But Joshua rose up. But the bad news, the whole generation of Moses died. You see, the relay race is not just for the leaders. It's for the whole generation. Don't let your generation die. Don't let your legacy die. Don't let your ministry die. Don't let your anointing die. Don't let God's promise die. Don't mess up and exchange the exchange zone parents or leaders. Don't mess up this exchange zone. I once heard it said or read or something, and it kind of changed the way I see church. And I love the fact that we're able now, in addition to a lot of things that we do for the community, now on Fridays from 3 to 6, we can hand out thousands of boxes to different families in need. And not only that, but we're blessing about 10 churches, and they get to also now bless their community. So it's just an amazing blessing. It's like the miracle catch of fish that we're experiencing, and we're calling other boats to come because, God has blessed us so much. And I once heard it said, and this is why we do what we do at this church. If your church closed today, would the community even notice it's closed tomorrow? I mean, your church members will know. Pastor's going to know. But will your community know? In other words, I believe, or we believe here, that the local church exists to impact the world around it. And if the local church is only focused within the four walls of the church, it's not being the church. I don't care how amazing your mission statement sounds, but the church doesn't have a mission statement. God's heart, God's mission has a church. Like it's the backwards. It's not that a local church has its own mission statement. No, it's that God's Big C church has a mission. And it's to go and make disciples. It's to change the world around it, to teach them to be baptized and teach them to obey the law. That's the mission of the church. And so, with that being said, if we cease to exist, would the community around us even notice? For years, if this church ceased to exist, the community probably wouldn't know. As of the last 10 years, 15 years, if this church ceased to exist, not talking about church people, this community would most definitely notice. Matter of fact, last Friday, this elder lady that has never stepped foot in this church was testifying and just giving thanks to my dad and some of the people that were volunteering here last Friday, saying, even though I've never been here, but our community, this church, we purchased it, and 3 months later, Harvey came. We got up to 4 feet of water, 5 foot of water. Our neighbors, this community that we serve, some houses got filled up to 12 feet of water. Like, it was horrible. I got videos. It was a bad shape, this community back here. They got hit very hard. God began to send random people. We emptied out, we filled up our gym and emptied it out with non-perishable foods and clothes like 5 times. We were able to feed, I don't know how many, 1,000 people, 1,000 meals. We had random people from Tennessee with barbecue pits showing up on our church property just cooking. And then we had other people randomly coming and cooking. We had businesses donating. God just blessed us without us ever even having a first service here. So she testified saying, Pastor, I just want to thank you. Like, this church, since y'all moved in, before y'all even had church, you guys were already a blessing to this community. You guys saved us during Harvey. And now that you're doing this every Friday, thank you so much. You guys really love this community. That family, this community will definitely notice if this church stopped existing. The school across the street, they said since we moved in here, they actually recognized us within the whole district as their community partner that they wanted to recognize. Of the whole district, we were the ones that were most engaged. Not only, maybe it was the breakfast tacos we give them at the beginning of each year, or the different things we do for them throughout the year, but we serve our community, and they most definitely will notice if this church ever closes. If you're a pastor or a leader at another church, let that be what motivates you and drives you. Even if they never come to church, even if they never repeat the sinner's prayer or get saved, but did they encounter the love of Christ because of you? Our mission statement here is to connect with God and to connect with others. And we're reaching out to this community. I think you guys get the point now. But where I wanted to flip that now to you, to me, make it personal, is if you cease to exist, if I cease to exist, will anybody even notice it? We hear it all the time. We just saw Ravi Zachariah. I mean, because his sermons are online and books and stuff, like his stuff's going to live on for a while, forever. But we don't have books. We don't have sermons online. Like, how will you live on forever? How will your legacy live on forever? How will your theology live on forever? How will your encounters with God live on forever? What is your legacy? What's going to happen if you cease to exist? Is there anybody that takes it on? Is there anybody that carries it forward? You see, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We are part of something that began way before us. And we're also part of something that will finish way after us. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's a greater picture that you and I are playing a part of. What legacy will you leave? 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6 to 8, it says, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. And I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Henceforth, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness." Like, you only get the crown if you finish the race, "which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. And not only to me, but also all those who have loved his appearing." God is not done with you, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, or you that is listening to me today. God is not done with you. It's much easier for us to look at all of our shortcomings and imperfections and say, "Oh, well, my kid, he'll accomplish what I couldn't accomplish." Yeah, maybe that's true. But what are we doing to leave that lasting impression, that lasting effect, to make sure to secure not only his encounters with God, but so that they could also finish the race that you and I couldn't finish? My dad, 75 years old this year, and he just got done recording some sermons, couple of sermons. He doesn't have to record every single day, daily devotionals, a couple of weeknight preachings. 75 years old. What's the legacy he's leaving me? But there's nothing better than serving Jesus Christ. Actually, my brother and I, we're like, "Dad, we're recording too much. We're doing too much. Like, can we just take a break? When can we stop recording?" He's like, "No. While there's a need, we still have to serve the people. We serve them with food. We serve them with, but most importantly, as pastors, we serve them spiritually. And we have to give it to them. We have to, work double if we have to during this pandemic. We have to, as the pastors." That's the legacy he's leaving me. Now, I got 3 little boys and a little girl. I got 3 little boys. What legacy am I leaving them? The other day, my son preached his first message at our family little devotional, and poor kid. He was standing on the chair broke. Thankfully, I recorded it, and he said amen. I pushed stop, and as soon as I pushed stop, I guess he was about to get down from the chair snapped, broke, kind of cut him. He started bleeding. He was like, "Oh no, my first sermon." And it's the worst sermon ever in the history of preachers. We just kind of laughed about that. But what legacy are we leaving our kids? I didn't ask him to preach. My 8-year-old son said, "I want to preach that. When am I going to preach? I see you, Grandpa, Theo, another Theo preaching. Like, when am I going to get to preach? I want to preach too." This is the legacy we're leaving. Am I going to say, "Well, I mess up too much"? And Jeremiah, my oldest, he's a good kid. He can do what I couldn't do. No. I'm going to do what I got to do. And in the proper exchange zone, my son will continue to run the race. We got to run to finish the race. Not only to you, but all those, like Timothy is saying here, or Paul is saying to Timothy, not only to you, but all those that love his appearance. What will happen in this exchange zone? What will happen when you feel like it's time? Like, my dad's already exchanging and handing the baton over to my brother, but he's still running. It's crazy. Like when you hand off the baton, even if your leg of the race is over, like you see it in the Olympics, they still run with them. They're cheering them on. They're coaching them. They're hyping them up. And my dad's doing that for his kids, for this church, not only for his sons, but the church leaders, the staff. And he's encouraging us, and he's pushing us. He's motivating us. He's challenging us. So you still got to run your race. You got to learn to hand the baton over, to learn to disciple, to be ready for the next generation. We don't know when to hand off the baton, and we don't trust the next generation. But you got to remember, the same God that somehow changed your life and my life, somehow made something out of me, it's the same God that's in control over your son, over your daughter, over the next generation. This was me worried about whenever I left youth pastor. Like, man, what's going to happen? I was a youth pastor for so many years. Like, no. The youth wasn't in my hands. The youth didn't grow because of me. God is in control. Way before me, and he's in control of God's people way after me. Don't be like Joshua, who doesn't have anybody to hand it off to. It takes strong leaders, parents, mentors, pastors to know when to hand off the baton. And for the next generation, younger kids, the receivers of the exchange zone, I want to maybe point my attention to you. Sometimes we don't know how to handle ministry. Like you can't just do it on your own. You need your senior pastor. You need mentors. You need older people to be in your ear. You need to be surrounded in good counsel. Proverbs tells us that we need this. We want it easy, with no sacrifice, no preparation, no discipline. We just want to have it given to us instead of working and earning it. We just want to receive all the glory without paying the price. We have a generation that wants to change everything except for allowing God to change their lives. Remember, it's a relay race. Nobody started on top. We're privileged here that our Father's handing on the baton, but we had to work for it. Not only did I leave and plant a church, but my brother left and planted a church in Mexico. It's part of the process. God has to mold us, to break us, and form us. We can't afford to be disqualified like those two Olympic races in Athens and in Beijing. We can't afford it. We have everything God has given us to win. Matter of fact, we're going to win. He's never going to be disqualified, and I pray that you neither are disqualified. Hebrews 12, verse 1-3, it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." In closing, I want to encourage you and challenge you. We must be better. We must do better, not only for us and for right now, but for the next generation. What will you do in your part to run this relay race? In 2012, this Olympic women's relay race team not only won finally after 2 chances, right, of being disqualified, but they made sure they weren't going to make any more mistakes. But they won in fashion. They broke one of the oldest world records that still existed. They broke the record. You see, I still believe this generation can be part of the greatest revival this nation has ever seen, the greatest revival this world has ever experienced. How will you hand over the baton? How will you lead your children to the fear of the Lord? How will you not only teach, but live by example on how to live for Jesus? How will you demonstrate to them the passion for Christ? How will you leave the legacy of the gospel? The screen behind me is going off, right? I'm sorry for your distractions. But how will you, in the midst of distractions, leave a lasting legacy for God's people? I pray that you're more like Moses, and not just the good of Joshua, but you learn from the bad. You have one life to live. I know this younger generation, YOLO, you only live once, but because you only live once, we only have one shot at this. We don't have 3 chances to run this relay race. We have one shot to run it. And we have to make the best of it. I pray that you stop being down on yourself or blaming others, but that you run this race thinking about those that will come tomorrow. My dad did everything, my parents did everything they did for the Lord. thinking about their children and those that they would impact. That's my legacy I live. Now I got my kids, my wife to lead as an example, and also, hopefully, those that hear me, those that attend our church, and one day, the next generation. That's our desire. I pray that you're blessed and that you know that you have a part to play in this relay race. Again, it's not just for pastors, this is for you, and you've got to do better. This generation is counting on you to run your leg of the race. God bless you.